The morning in Los Angeles carries a proud beauty, especially along Wilshire Boulevard, where towering glass skyscrapers reflect the brilliant golden sunlight. Nestled in the heart of this extravagance is Elite Motors, a car dealership with a transparent glass facade that allows passers-by to marvel at the luxurious vehicles inside. The showroom spans over 500 square meters, its pristine white marble floor gleaming under LED lights, and each car is displayed like a work of art. A fiery red Ferrari 488 Pista with perfect curves, a pearlescent white Bentley Continental GT exuding aristocratic elegance, and most striking of all, a glossy black Lamborghini Aventador SVJ, priced at over $2 million, a symbol of speed and power. The air inside the showroom is thick with the scent of new leather, tinged with a hint of expensive cologne from wealthy customers. Soft jazz music drifts from the ceiling speakers, blending with the sound of leather shoes tapping rhythmically on the floor as sales staff move briskly. Dressed in sharply tailored black suits with glossy silk ties, they greet every visitor with a professional smile, especially those stepping out of Mercedes or Porsches parked at the entrance. The automatic glass doors slide open with a faint whoosh, nearly drowned out by the background music. An elderly black man steps inside, his worn-out sneakers squeaking against the marble floor, disrupting the space's perfection. He's about 70, gaunt yet sturdy, as if time has weathered his body but failed to break his spirit. His clothes are simple to the point of shabbiness. A faded light blue cotton shirt, worn at the collar and cuffs, paired with tattered jeans stained with old grease marks. A gray baseball cap, so frayed its front logo is barely legible, sits atop his head. His hands are rough and calloused, faint scars crisscrossing his fingers, evidence of a lifetime of hard labor, perhaps in a factory or on a construction site. But his eyes, deep and bright beneath the cap's brim, shine with something different, a gentle kindness mixed with an enigmatic spark, as if he's hiding a story no one here could fathom. Jake Thompson, a 27-year-old salesman, is wiping down the Lamborghini Aventador's glass with a microfiber cloth when he turns around. Tall and broad-shouldered, with slicked back blonde hair gleaming with gel, his cold blue eyes size people up by their appearance. Jake wears an Armani navy suit, a bold red silk tie, and polished leather shoes so shiny they could double as mirrors. Confident, bordering on arrogant, he believes he was born to sell cars like these and thrive in the world of the wealthy. When his gaze lands on the old man, his smile vanishes, replaced by a sneer. "What's he staring at?" he mutters to Tom, a nearby colleague, before flashing a mocking grin. Probably here to beg for change or ask for directions. No chance for his kind here. Tom, a stocky guy with a neatly trimmed beard and gold-rimmed glasses, chuckles along, pretending to shuffle papers at his desk. "Yeah, must have wandered over from East LA. Smell him. Reeks of sweat," he whispers, loud enough for a few nearby staff to overhear and snicker. The old man pays no mind to the murmurs. He walks slowly past the row of cars, his eyes scanning each one with a mix of curiosity and delight. He pauses at the Lamborghini Aventador SVJ, tilting his head to admire it, his hand lightly brushing the glossy paint as if tracing its contours. He lingers there, his eyes lighting up at the Golden Bull logo on the hood, then nods slightly as if weighing something in his mind. After a moment, he turns to Jake, his voice low and warm but raspy with age. "Son, is this one available? I'd like to take a look." Jake stops wiping the glass and looks up. He scans the old man from head to toe, from the dusty torn sneakers to the threadbare cap, then bursts out laughing. The sound echoes through the quiet showroom, drawing annoyed glances from a few customers browsing nearby. "Sir," Jake says, dripping with sarcasm, "this isn't the place for someone like you. This car's over $2 million. Do you even know what $2 million is? More than you've made in your whole life. What are you going to pay with pocket change?" Tom and a few others erupt in laughter, as if it's the funniest thing they've heard all day. Sarah, a young saleswoman near the reception desk, covers her mouth and giggles, her eyes sparkling with amusement. Mr. Richard, the showroom manager, glances out from his glass-walled office, then returns to scrolling on his phone, uninterested in intervening. To him, scenes like this aren't worth his time. In the corner, Mia Carter, a 22-year-old newbie, frowns, Petite, with black hair tied into a high ponytail, her brown eyes radiate intelligence but timidity. She wears the simple staff uniform, a white blouse and black pencil skirt, unadorned except for a cheap watch on her left wrist. Mia's been at Elite Motors for 2 months, working to pay off college debt. She dislikes Jake's attitude but lacks the courage to speak up. She just stands there clutching her notepad, watching the old man with an odd, indefinable feeling. The old man doesn't react to Jake's taunts. He offers a faint, enigmatic smile, his dry lips curling slightly, as if he's heard such words 1,000 times before. He nods, as if agreeing with something only he understands, and says, "Thanks for explaining, son. I'll come back later." His tone remains calm, devoid of anger or shame. He walks to the reception desk, pulls an old ballpoint pen from his shirt pocket, scribbles a phone number on a scrap of paper, and sets it down before turning to leave. The glass doors close behind him, leaving a brief silence in the showroom. Jake breaks it with another laugh. "See? Kicking out people like that is the right call. Messing up our floor? If he can buy a car here, I'll quit on the spot." He slaps his thigh, pleased with himself, then resumes wiping the Lamborghini's glass as if he's just accomplished something grand. Mia quietly picks up the paper from the desk. She stares at the handwritten number, the shaky but legible scrawl, 323 fee 501 and 2. She looks up, watching the old man's figure disappear into the bustling street, where luxury cars glide by and horns blare incessantly. A strange feeling wells up inside her. Not pity, but curiosity. Something in his eyes, in the way he smiled through the mockery, convinces her he's more than he seems. She slips the paper into her pocket, telling herself she'll think it over later. At noon, Jake's still talking about the old man in the staff break room. He lounges on a leather sofa, legs crossed, munching on a sandwich from a nearby deli. "Bet he doesn't even have $100 in his pocket," he says to Tom, chewing loudly. "People like that daring to walk in here. Talk about not knowing their place." Tom nods, scrolling Instagram on his phone. "Yeah, probably lost from some slum. Look at those ripped jeans. Bet they haven't been washed in a year." They burst out laughing, the sound carrying down the hall. Mia sits at a small table in the corner, quietly eating her homemade lunch, white rice with stir-fried greens and a tiny piece of fried chicken. She stays out of the conversation, head down, but a growing unease stirs within her. When everyone leaves the break room to resume work, Mia stays behind alone. She pulls out the paper, staring at the number again. Should I call, she wonders? Just to apologize, but what if he's upset? She hesitates, then tucks it away, deciding to mull it over tonight when she's back in her cramped East LA apartment, alone with her single bed and a few worn library books. The next day, Jake was still gloating over his triumph. In the staff break room, he sat with his legs crossed on a chair, holding a Starbucks coffee, recounting the story to Tom and a few others. "I told him straight up, 'You don't belong here.' His face just froze. It was hilarious. People like that are just a waste of time." He laughed loudly, his tone dripping with smugness, then took a sip of his scalding latte, leaving a bit of white foam on his lip. Jake grew up in a middle-class family in the suburbs of Los Angeles near Van Nuys. His father, Harold, was a mechanic at a small garage, coming home every day in grease-stained overalls. His mother, Linda, worked as a bank teller, constantly complaining that her salary wasn't enough to afford a bigger house. From a young age, Jake despised his parents' mundane existence. He dreamed of a life of wealth, driving Lamborghinis, wearing expensive suits, and living in a Malibu beachfront villa. Elite Motors was the first step toward that dream. For him, selling luxury cars wasn't just a job, it was a way to prove his worth, to escape the shadow of a boy raised in a small house with a weed-choked front yard. Jake believed appearance was everything. He spent hours each morning styling his hair, picking out ties and spritzing himself with Creed Aventus, an exorbitant cologne he'd saved up a month to buy. He judged customers by their clothes, the cars they drove, and how they spoke. An old ragged man like the one from yesterday was, in Jake's eyes, no better than street trash. Not worth a glance, let alone respect. Mia was different. She was born in a poor neighborhood in East LA, where street gangs ruled every corner, and police sirens were a nightly lullaby. Her parents divorced when she was 5, leaving her with her mother in a moldy, run-down apartment. Her mom, Rosa, worked as a hotel maid, often coming home with hands cracked from harsh chemicals. Mia grew up on meager meals, dry bread and canned beans, but always dreamed of a better future. A college scholarship was her only ticket out of the slums, but now she worked tirelessly at Elite Motors to pay off her student loans. She didn't like Jake's arrogance, but she lacked the courage to confront him. She quietly did her job, taking orders, wiping down car windows when needed, and avoided the pointless chatter in the break room. That evening, after the showroom closed, Mia stayed late to check the security cameras, a side task she took on for extra cash. She sat in the small control room, the blue glow of the screens illuminating her tired face. She rewound the footage to the moment the old man walked in, studying his every move. The way he admired the Lamborghini wasn't that of casual curiosity. It was the appraisal of someone who understood the car's true value, from its V12 engine to its aerodynamic design. He stood there hand-brushing the glossy paint, eyes alight as if recalling something from his past. Mia paused the video and zoomed in on his face. Beneath the brim of his cap, she noticed a faint scar on his forehead, a thin, faded line, perhaps from an old accident. She pulled the scrap of paper from her pocket, staring at the handwritten phone number. Should I call to apologize, she wondered, her fingers tracing the paper's edge. He didn't do anything wrong, but Jake treated him so badly. I don't want him to think everyone here is like that. But she hesitated. What if he's angry? What if he doesn't want to hear from me? She tucked the paper back into her pocket, deciding to think it over when she got home. On the ride back, Mia sat on the 720 bus, gazing out the foggy window. Los Angeles sparkled at night with lights from towering buildings. But as the bus passed into East LA, the scenery shifted. Dilapidated houses with peeling paint and groups of teens loitering under dim yellow streetlights. She got off at her stop, walking through a dark alley where a dog barked in the distance. Her apartment was on the third floor of an old building, the stairs creaking under each step. Inside, the space was a mere 20 square meters. A single bed against the wall, a small desk cluttered with old library books, and a kitchen corner with a broken microwave. Mia sat on the bed, pulled out the paper again, but then put it away. She lay down, staring at the water-stained ceiling, and drifted off to sleep with the old man's image in her mind. 3 days passed, and no one mentioned the old man again. Jake continued his work, flashing bright smiles at wealthy customers, while Mia quietly toiled in her corner of the showroom. That is, until Wednesday morning, when a sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up out front. Its engine purred softly, drawing every eye from staff and customers alike. The car stretched over 5 meters, its body gleaming like a mirror, chrome alloy wheels glinting in the sunlight. The door opened, and LeBron James, the legendary basketball star, nearly 2 meters tall, muscles bulging under a black suit, stepped out with an air of authority. Behind him was the old man from before, now utterly transformed. He wore a perfectly tailored gray cashmere suit, polished leather shoes reflecting the light, and his tattered cap had been replaced with a sophisticated brown fedora. Jake, standing near the entrance, dropped his coffee cup. It shattered on the floor, splashing liquid onto his pristine shoes. His jaw fell open, eyes wide in disbelief at the sight before him. "Dad," LeBron said, his deep voice laced with respect as he placed a hand on the old man's shoulder. "Pick whichever one you want. I'm taking you shopping today." Mia stood in the corner, hand on her chest, heart pounding. Tom and the other staff whispered in shock, unable to process what they were seeing. Sarah muttered to Tom, "No way! That old guy's LeBron James's dad?" But the way LeBron looked at the old man left no room for doubt. It was deep, almost reverent respect. The old man, now introduced as Clarence, smiled, his gaze brushing past Jake as if nothing had happened. He stepped into the showroom, his leather shoes tapping steadily on the floor, and stopped in front of the Lamborghini Aventador. He turned to Jake, his voice still warm, but now carrying a hint of authority. "Young man, the other day you said I couldn't afford a car here. What do you think now?" Jake stammered, his face turning tomato red. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't know. I didn't mean..." He bowed his head, hands trembling, sweat beading on his forehead and soaking his suit collar. LeBron frowned, stepping forward with the same commanding presence he brought to the basketball court. "Didn't know? You don't need to know who he is to treat people decently, do you? Who do you think you are? Kicking my dad out of here?" His voice boomed, sharp and powerful, silencing the entire showroom. Clarence raised a hand to stop LeBron, his smile unwavering. "Easy, son. No need to make a fuss. I just want to buy that Lamborghini." He turned to Mia, who stood quietly in the corner, eyes wide with astonishment. "Young lady, can you help me?" Mia nodded rapidly, her heart racing like it might leap out of her chest. She stepped forward, hands slightly shaky as she clutched her notepad. Yes, sir. Right this way." She couldn't believe she'd been chosen, but a quiet joy surged within her. She led Clarence and LeBron to the desk, trying to keep her voice steady despite the whirlwind in her mind. Jake stood there, head bowed, feeling like the world was crumbling beneath him. He never imagined that his decision to dismiss the old man days ago would lead to this, a consequence beyond his wildest dreams. Jake stood frozen, his eyes red and teary, sweat streaming from his forehead down his cheeks. He didn't dare look up, unable to face LeBron's or Clarence's gaze. The whispers of the other staff buzzed around him, each word slicing into his already fragile pride like a knife. LeBron began speaking about Clarence, his voice a mix of pride and emotion, as if recounting a living legend. "He's my adoptive dad. Back when I was an orphan kid in Akron, Ohio, nobody wanted to take me in. My mom died of illness. My biological dad walked out before I was even born. I was a street kid, sleeping in cold alleys, eating stale bread from trash cans. Clarence found me and brought me to his little house on the outskirts of Cleveland. He gave me a home, an old but warm bed, and a beat-up basketball he'd picked up from a court near the factory." LeBron paused, his eyes shimmering with gratitude. "He taught me to play ball on the cracked cement court behind his house, a pothole-ridden slab with a rusty hoop. But to me, it was everything. He wasn't just a father, he was my hero. Every day, he worked 16-hour shifts at the steel mill, his back bent under the weight of red-hot beams. He'd come home with blistered hands, but he'd still sit down and teach me how to shoot, how to defend. He told me, 'You've got to be strong, son, not to beat others, but to overcome yourself.'" Clarence had been a steel worker in Cleveland for 40 years. He didn't have much formal education, only finishing middle school before dropping out to help his family. But he possessed a sharp mind and rare patience. As LeBron grew up and started gaining fame in high school basketball, Clarence quietly invested in real estate and stocks. He bought cheap industrial lots, waited for their value to rise, then sold them for hefty profits. He put his modest workers' savings into startups like Tesla and Amazon. Over the years, he amassed a fortune, hundreds of millions of dollars without anyone knowing. Yet he never flaunted it. He still lived in that modest Cleveland house, wore the same old clothes from his factory days, and spent most of his wealth helping poor kids. Kids like the LeBron he once was. Jake looked up, his vision blurred with tears. He'd insulted a man not just wealthy but noble, a man he could never measure up to, not even a fraction. "Mr. Clarence, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice trembling. "I didn't mean to offend you. I just thought you weren't—" Clarence met Jake's eyes, his expression stern but not angry. "You don't need to apologize to me," he said, his voice low and steady. "You shamed yourself, that's all. But I'm not one to hold grudges. Life's too long and too short, depending on how you see it." He turned to LeBron. "Son, I want this young man to do something." Jake lifted his head, a flicker of hope in his desperate eyes. Clarence continued, "Drive that Lamborghini to the charity center in East LA. I want to donate it to the kids there. Can you do that?" Jake nodded frantically, though his mind was a tangled mess. He took the keys from Mia and walked to the car, his legs heavy as lead. The Lamborghini Aventador roared to life as he started it, the engine's rumble echoing down Wilshire Boulevard, turning heads along the street. Jake drove through the glitzy streets of West LA, then into the grittier East Side, where skyscrapers gave way to rundown slums. At an intersection, he stopped and saw a group of kids playing ball on a dusty court by the roadside. They wore tattered clothes and hole-ridden shoes, but their smiles shone brighter than the sun. Jake gripped the steering wheel tighter, shame welling up inside him. He pulled up to the charity center, a weathered building with peeling paint and cracked roof tiles. As he parked, kids swarmed out, cheering around the Lamborghini. "Mister, that car's so cool!" An 8-year-old boy shouted, his hand brushing the glossy paint. Jake stepped out, handed the keys to a staff member, and stood silently watching the children. For the first time in his life, he felt small, not because he was poor or a failure, but because he'd never done anything meaningful like Clarence had. Meanwhile, back at the showroom, Mia finalized the car purchase with Clarence. She sat at her desk, carefully entering details into the computer. VIN number, paint color, optional features. Her hands still trembled with nerves, but she kept her voice steady. Sir, the total comes to $2.3 million, including taxes and fees. Would you like to pay by card or wire transfer? Clarence chuckled softly. Wire transfer, little lady. I don't like carrying cash. He pulled out his phone, an old iPhone with a cracked corner, and sent the payment right in front of her. Mia's eyes widened as the amount flashed on her screen. LeBron stood nearby, watching her with an approving look. When everything was done, he shook her hand, his massive grip enveloping hers. You've got a rare kindness, Mia, he said, his smile warm. That day, you were the only one who didn't laugh at my dad. If you ever need anything, call me. Here's my number. He handed her a black business card with LeBron James embossed in gold, leaving Mia blushing, hardly believing her luck. 2 days later, Jake was summoned to Mr. Richards' office. You've disgraced this showroom, the manager said, his voice icy. You chased off an important client who turned out to be LeBron James's adoptive father. You're done here as of today. Jake left Elite Motors with his head bowed, his heart heavy as if weighed down by stones. He stepped outside, hands in his pockets, his once polished leather shoes now coated with dust from his trip to East LA. But as he reached the sidewalk, Clarence was waiting, leaning against LeBron's Rolls-Royce. He'd reverted to his old clothes, the faded shirt and tattered jeans, as if to remind Jake that he didn't need appearances to prove his worth. I heard you lost your job, Clarence said, his voice warm and steady. I told LeBron to give you a chance. Starting tomorrow, you'll work at my charity center. The pay won't be as high as here, but you'll learn a lot. Jake nodded, the arrogance gone from his eyes. He began working at the center, reluctant at first, but slowly he changed. He taught the kids how to play basketball, fix their old bikes, and learned to listen to stories he'd once ignored. Tales of orphans, single mothers, and unemployed men. Day by day, he discovered a different Jake, not the arrogant one in an Armani suit, but one who'd kneel to tie a child's shoelaces. Mia became a friend of Clarence's family. She often visited the center, playing ball with the kids alongside LeBron and the old man. One evening, as they sat on a wooden bench watching the children run around under the sunset, she asked, Sir, why didn't you get angry at people like Jake? Clarence chuckled, his eyes twinkling in the golden orange light. Why bother getting mad, little lady? Life's too short. What matters is what you do when no one's watching. I don't live to prove anything to anyone. I live to help those who need me. The story closes with Clarence sitting in his newly bought Lamborghini, the second one, just for him. He drove through the streets of Los Angeles, his old baseball cap resting on the passenger seat, a gentle smile on his lips. LeBron stood on the sidewalk, watching the car disappear into the bustling traffic, whispering, Thank you, Dad.